Welcome to today's discussion of data and strategy, Wisconsin's biohealth industry. Discussion is facilitated by the Universities of Wisconsin using federal funds under award EDA 24HDQ0G0401 from the Economic Development Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce. The statements, findings, conclusions, and recommendations are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Economic Development Administration or the U.S. Department of Commerce. Joining us today is Matt Kures, a researcher and economic development expert with the Community Development Institute at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Matt spent years analyzing labor market data and economic trends. Today, he'll help us understand the workforce realities shaping biohealth and related industries in Wisconsin. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Ginger. Again, my name is Matt Kures. I am a community economic development specialist and researcher with the Community Development Institute at UW-Madison's Division of Extension. And it's my pleasure today to provide some workforce development perspectives related to the Wisconsin Biohealth Tech Hub. I'm going to begin today talking about some broad perspectives on workforce development and what it might mean in terms of how it aligns with the Wisconsin Biohealth Tech Hub. I will then help us think about some different measures we can use to align this work in terms of workforce development. And then I will end with some perspectives on what different data sets can tell us about what the Tech Hub might mean for the state of Wisconsin and potentially some strategies we can think about to move this effort forward. So let's start with some definitions of workforce development. And there are a lot of definitions out there, but here are two that I use often and two that I like because I think they encapsulate a lot of different perspectives on how we might approach workforce development in the state of Wisconsin. The first definition is the system of programs, policies, and institutions that help workers and employers connect to each other and make investments in workforce skills and human capital towards the goals of household economic self-sufficiency, business success, and place prosperity. A couple of key points in this definition is that workforce development isn't just about providing workers for businesses. Now, certainly that is one of the goals of workforce development, but it's also about the individuals and the workers themselves in terms of investments in them and their human capital so that they can become prosperous and self-sufficient. But it's also about business success and the prosperity of the places where the businesses and workers are located. So it's about people and about place. The second definition I like is workforce development implies more than employment training in the narrow sense. It means substantial employer engagement, deep community connections, career advancement, integrative human supports, contextual and industry-driven education and training, and the connective tissue of networks. This definition is important because it encapsulates the workforce development ecosystem. It's about employers and it's about workers, but it's also about networks. It's about partnerships. It's about working together to help us drive our efforts forward in terms of workforce development and also helping people and places and companies become successful. Now, there's often a disconnect between workforce development and economic development. And I would say that this disconnect has gotten smaller over the last decade because of many of the issues we're facing related to workforce availability, workforce skills development. But unfortunately, workforce development and economic development organizations often have different funding sources. They often use different metrics for measurement, and many times are even housed in separate agencies. So a lot of times there's not a lot of overlap in terms of how these organizations are working together. That said, we have seen a lot of movement towards more partnerships, and we're seeing workforce development, economic development organizations work more in line with one another to focus both on labor supply and labor demand. We're thinking about social issues more so in terms of workforce development traditionally, but we've often moved to thinking about some of these social issues in terms of economic development as well. We're also thinking about individuals that may have barriers to employment in terms of workforce development. And economic development, we often focus on demand for highly skilled and educated workers. But again, we are seeing some movement in terms of addressing the needs of all of these organizations and all the individuals that they may support. So we are definitely seeing more communication going on between workforce development and economic development organizations. When we think about the Biohealth Tech Hub, we have to think about some of the industries that may be involved in this effort. We have to think about the occupations that these industries may demand, and we have to think about some of the skills that these occupations may require. And there's a lot of different industries that may be a part of the Tech Hub, but we are just thinking about some broad ones in terms of our discussion today. So we are thinking about drugs and pharmaceutical manufacturing, which covers a variety of different types of manufacturing facilities. We think about medical device and equipment manufacturing, which also, again, covers a lot of different types of manufacturing facilities in the state of Wisconsin. We can think about research testing in medical laboratories. We can think about the distribution system for many of the products that are produced in terms of bioscience-related distribution, which often includes wholesalers and supply merchants. We can think about the healthcare providers themselves, which can cover ambulatory healthcare services, hospitals, and nursing and residential care facilities. And then finally, we can think about health IT, which can cover electronic health records, clinical trial acceleration, telemedicine, and genomics. We can also think about many of the occupations that are required by these industries. So we're not just thinking about the industries themselves, we're thinking about the people that work within these industries. And that covers a breadth of different occupations. And this is not intended to be an all-inclusive list, but rather a description of some of the types of occupations we often see in life science or biohealth related industries. So we can think about life science occupations themselves. We can also think about engineers and computer occupations, which are often very highly concentrated in these industries. We can think about production, transportation, repair occupations. So individuals that may be working on distribution, maybe repairing the machines that are used in manufacturing different types of goods, or think about the production individuals that are working on these machines. We can think about the business management and financial occupations that are helping support these industries, maybe in back offices. And we can also think about the individuals that are providing sales support, so customer service representatives, office clerks, and buyers and purchasing agents, for example, that are also working to sell these products and get them into market. Now, we mentioned there is a bit of a disconnect often in workforce development, economic development efforts, and we can think about those different industries and the occupations that we just talked about a second ago and think about how workforce and economic development efforts can be aligned to help those industries and help those occupations become successful in the marketplace. And some strategies for alignment can include building partnerships with a variety of economic development organizations and stakeholders. So in the beginning, we talked about the importance of networks. So are there better ways that we can connect the economic development organizations, both locally and regionally, to workforce development organizations and the businesses themselves? And if we look at the examples of workforce development stakeholders and organizations, indeed, we see workers, employers, educational system, local, state, and federal government agencies, social service agencies, and labor organizations, all being a part of this network that helps us move these types of efforts forward. We can think about deepening the involvements in firms themselves and asking them the types of needs that they have in terms of workforce and economic development. And we think about that, we have to think also about small to medium-sized enterprises, as we'll see in a second here, because they are a very important part of this industry sector. We can think about partnering to understand the characteristics of the region's labor force. So sharing data, and we'll talk a lot about data here in a second, and understanding some of the different measures of data that we can use to help people understand what is needed by industries and what is needed by individuals working in these industries. We can think about sector-based or cluster-based approach, and that's exactly what we're doing with the Biohealth Tech Hub. We are creating deep relationships among employers and workforce development organizations in a specific sector and their associated industries. And we can also think about reevaluating existing programs or identifying new and appropriate strategies. So if we're thinking about this in a whole different ecosystem in terms of a specific industry sector, maybe there's new strategies we can identify that'll help us move our goals forward in terms of growing this industry in the state of Wisconsin. I mentioned a second ago the importance of connecting with small to mid-sized firms. And this is just one example of professional, technical, and scientific services, but this also holds for many other industry sectors. This chart looks at the number of Wisconsin jobs in terms of establishment sizes through different time periods going from 2015 up to 2024. And what we have here are establishments with one employee or sole proprietors. That's that dashed black line on the bottom. And we can see that in terms of total employment, these very small firms don't really account for a large share of total employment in this industry sector in the state of Wisconsin, but they do maybe account for a large number of establishments. If we go to the next size, we go to establishments with 10 to 99 employees as example. We can see that these mid-sized firms actually account for a very large number of total employees in the state of Wisconsin within this industry sector, which is a important component of the Biohealth Tech Hub. So if we ignore these mid-sized firms with 10 to 99 employees, we're ignoring or we're missing a very large share of potential employers in the state of Wisconsin that may have important workforce development needs. We can think about somewhat smaller firms or establishments with 2 to 9 employees. We see that they do not maybe account for as many employees as that 10 to 99 category, but nonetheless, they still account for almost 100,000 employees in the state of Wisconsin. And we can also see that our larger firms or establishments with 10 to 99 or 10 to, excuse me, or 100 to 499 employees or establishments with 500 or more employees account for a sizable number of employees in the state of Wisconsin, but again, not as many as those mid-sized firms with 10 to 99 employees. So as we're engaging these different companies in the state of Wisconsin, if we're not connecting with those mid-sized firms, we are missing a large share of employers and employees in this industry sector. So in summary, if we think about workforce development, we can think about it as being both place-based and people-based. It's about the locations where companies and individuals are located, as well as the people that are located in those areas. We can think about collaboration. Again, the importance of networks in workforce development, economic development to help move our initiatives and goals forward. It's more than just training for specific skills. While training for specific skills is an important part of workforce development, it's also about thinking about place, prosperity, and the success of individuals and the success of businesses that require those skills. It's equitable, it's flexible, and it's data-driven. And importantly, data can also help us tell a story to our partners. And we will spend some time here going through some different data sets that may help us better tell that story to our businesses, to our companies, and to our organizations that are involved in our workforce development ecosystem. So if we think about workforce development, there's a lot of different measures that we can use. We can think about, things like commuting patterns. We can look at the size of our labor force in terms of population growth or how that population may be churning in terms of measures like migration. We can think about our age structure in terms of if different age groups are composing a large or small part of our labor force. We can think about the different occupations that are needed by the Biohealth Tech Hub. We can think about what educational attainments might be needed to become one of those occupations. We can think about things like labor participation, unemployment rates. We can think about other measures like housing costs and availability. If we're trying to do talent attraction and retention, do we have the types of housing, and is the housing affordable enough for individuals that may want to move or remain in our places? We can also think about the importance of wages. As part of these measures, we can also use them to inform a wide variety of different strategies. As I mentioned a second ago, we can think about talent attraction and retention. How do we attract new individuals that may be needed by these companies? Or if we've educated a lot of individuals locally, how do we make sure that we retain them in our areas so they're not migrating to different parts of the United States? We can think about the creation of career pathways or development curriculums. So if there are new skills that are needed by our employers, how are we engaging employers and employees to create career pathways that require those skills and help individuals obtain those skills? We can think about creating opportunities for individuals facing barriers to employment. So a lot of individuals may want to work or may want to work full time, but they require things like childcare, or they may be dislocated workers that may not have the skills that are needed. So how do we help them get those skills to help them engage in the workforce again? We can think about phased retirement programs and non-traditional schedules. As we'll see here in a second, we have an aging labor force. So how can we help individuals that may be thinking about retirement, maybe not retire entirely, but maybe go through a program that helps them more gradually retire and remain part of the workforce over the longer term? We'll think a little bit about automation, computerization, and AI. As we mentioned a second ago, things like housing development can be a workforce development strategy. Broadband infrastructure, affordability, and adoption. It's certainly, as we think about health IT and a lot of the other technologies that are part of the Biohealth Tech Hub, broadband is a very big part of the success of those industries. And we can also think about knowledge transfer and reverse mentoring. So as we do have individuals that are perhaps retiring, how do we make sure that those individuals do not retire and take all that knowledge with them? And how do we make sure that instead we transfer that knowledge to maybe the new workers that are coming online so we don't lose all that institutional knowledge or all that information that we know about a given industry or occupation? An important part of data analysis is looking at the big picture and understanding labor supply and demand. And some measures that we can use to understand supply and demand are the geographic extent of the labor market. As we'll see here in a second, many individuals live in one place and work in another. So how far are those individuals willing to commute to their place of employment? We can think about measures like the unemployment rate or the share of the labor force that is unemployed and actively looking for a job. And we can think about how those unemployment rates may vary across different places, across different time periods, or across different characteristics of the labor force, like occupations or ages. We can think about the size of the working age population, because that will dictate the number of individuals that may be available to work in our different industries. We can think about demand for specific skills or occupations. And we mentioned some of the occupations that may be needed by Tech Hub employers, but we can think about the specific skills of those occupations may need as well. Then we can also think about labor participation rates, or the share of the population that is either employed or unemployed and actively looking for a job. So there may be individuals that are not included in the unemployment rate because they're not looking for a job, but may want to re-engage in the labor force. And we can think about some of the barriers that they may face to re-engaging the labor force, like childcare, maybe weak demand for the types of skills that they have. Transportation may be a barrier if they can't get from their place of residence to their place of employment. School enrollment, justice system involvement, disability, and retirement. These are all other factors that may influence labor participation that we can think about in terms of maybe engaging individuals that may be part of our future labor force, but for some reason or another just simply cannot right now because they face one of these barriers. So let's start with commuting. And this is just an example for Adams County, just looking at a central county in the state of Wisconsin. And this looks at the census tract of employment for individuals who live in Adams County and have a job somewhere. And we can see that individuals who live in Adams County commute to many different places outside of Adams County. And we see that the larger the red circle, the larger the number of people that are employed in that place where they commute to. So they commute certainly to Dane County, they commute to the Milwaukee metropolitan statistical area, they commute to the Fox Valley. They are commuting across the state of Wisconsin. On the flip side, we can look at individuals who work in Adams County. Where do they live? And a very similar type of map, we can see that the larger the circle, the larger number of individuals that are commuting. But we can see that they, again, are commuting from all over the state of Wisconsin into Adams County for their employment. Now, what this means is that if we're thinking about workforce development and we're only focusing on our local area of interest and not thinking about a broader region, we may be missing a large part of our potential workforce. And we may be missing opportunities to engage individuals that may be part of our employment opportunities in our local area. So as we think about workforce development, we should be thinking about it from a regional perspective, not just a local perspective. And indeed, in a place like Dane County, we can see that it is increasingly dependent on individuals commuting into Dane County from other places. This looks at the number of in-commuters and out-commuters from 2002 to 2022. And we can see that that orange line, or in-commuters, are people that work in Dane County and live somewhere else. We see a growing number and increasing share of individuals that are employed in Dane County and reside somewhere else. So we can see that Dane County employers rely on over 33% or over a third of the total labor force coming in from somewhere else outside of Dane County. We can see that people do commute outside of Dane County as well for their place of employment, and that number has been going up somewhat as well, but simply not to the same degree as people flowing into Dane County from other places for employment opportunities. We can also think about how our working age population has changed over time. And this is an important consideration because, as we will see here, our working age population peaked in many instances around the year 2010. And what we're looking at here are two different age groups. We have the total working age population, which is individuals between the ages of 15 and 64. You can certainly work before the age of 15 or after the age of 64, but this is the age group that labor force economists often use as the total working age population. We can also look at the age group between the ages of 25 and 54. This is what's known as the prime working age population. And this is when individuals are most likely to be in the labor force compared to all other age groups. And we'll look at those participation rates here in a little bit. And what we have are two different perspectives on the size of the working age population. We have the bars, which is the share of the total population that is accounted for by the total working age population or the prime working age population. And then the lines, which simply record the total number of individuals in those two age groups. And again, we can see that the share of individuals in the prime working age category as well as the total working age category have come down since the year 2010. And we can also see that projections from the Wisconsin Department of Administration also suggest that they will continue to decline over the next 20 years or so. In terms of total age individuals in these two age categories, we can also see that they have come down since the 2010 census and are also projected to decline somewhat over the next 5 years or so, and then plateau into the year 2040. So from a general perspective, we can see that the individuals that are available in the state of Wisconsin to work in any industry have come past our peak point and are expected to continue to decline somewhat. So we will simply just have fewer workers available for all industries in the state of Wisconsin. And we can see that this varies somewhat across the state. So here we're looking at two different maps that look at the percent change in total working age population and the prime working age population from 2010 to 2020. The darker the blue, the higher the percentage loss of individuals in that age group. The orange categories, or orange counties, excuse me, are areas where individuals in those two age groups have increased. And if we look at the map on the left, which is the percent change in total working age population, we can see that most Wisconsin counties declined in this age group from 2010 to 2020. We only see a handful of Wisconsin counties that actually increased. If we look at the map on the right, which is the percent change in prime working age population, we can see that almost every Wisconsin county lost individuals in this age group over this time period, with only Eau Claire and Dane growing in terms of prime working age individuals in this 10-year period. If we look at projections from 2020 to 2030, we see a somewhat similar pattern. Projections for the total working age population suggest that only two Wisconsin counties, again, Eau Claire and Dane, are expected to grow in terms of total working age population from 2020 to 2030, with many Wisconsin counties, especially in northern and central Wisconsin, expected to lose a relatively large share of these individuals. In terms of prime working age population, again, we only see a handful of Wisconsin counties that are projected to grow from 2020 to 2030, with many Wisconsin counties, again, continuing to lose individuals within this age group. So again, a lot of areas in the state of Wisconsin are going to face constraints in terms of just the availability of individuals of working age. And this trend is expected to continue over the coming decades. What about our youth? We can think about individuals who may be young in their careers or perhaps just entering the labor force. And we can think about those individuals in terms of two different age groups. Individuals aged 15 to 19 who may be just perhaps graduating from high school and starting perhaps some sort of post-secondary educational opportunity. And individuals aged 20 to 24 who may be perhaps graduated from some sort of post-secondary program and are just entering the workforce, or are perhaps continuing their educational careers as they maybe pursue more advanced degrees or advanced skills. Similar to what we saw with the total working age individuals, these are two age groups that, on a percentage basis, have come down over the last several decades. And in terms of total individuals, they have also declined somewhat as well. We can also see that in terms of projections moving forward, a similar trend is expected to continue with declining shares of individuals between the ages of 15 to 19 and 20 to 24, and the overall numbers of these individuals continuing to decline. So the pipeline of individuals that may be coming up in terms of entering the labor force or gaining new skills and perhaps enhancing the labor force, those individuals, in terms of their total numbers and percent, are not expected to increase either. On the flip side of that, we can also think about individuals that are approaching retirement age. So we can think about the share of individuals age 55 or older. And here we're doing it on a county by county basis, going back to the first quarter of the year 2000 up to the first quarter of the year 2023. The darker the share, or the darker the shade of red, the higher shade of individuals that are employed in that county that are age 55 or older. And we can see the transition from that map on the left to the map on the right. Most Wisconsin counties have grown dramatically in terms of their share of employees age 55 or older. Indeed, most Wisconsin counties have experienced almost a doubling in terms of their share of individuals age 55 or older. So many of these individuals are going to be perhaps leaving their place of employment or perhaps leaving the labor force altogether in the coming years. So we'll have to think about many opportunities to replace those workers in particular northern Wisconsin and central Wisconsin, where we do see some very high shares. We can also think about employees age 55 or older on an industry sector basis. So here we're looking at the percent of total employees in a given industry sector that may be age 55 or older. And this is data from the second quarter of 2024. We can see that some industry sectors have a very high share of individuals that are age 55 or older. So we can think about the agricultural industry. We can think about real estate, rental and leasing, transportation and warehousing. Here we see perhaps almost 30% or more of individuals in these industry sectors that are age 55 or older. Now, some of these industry sectors also employ more individuals than others. So we can also think about the size in terms of the number of individuals that are age 55 or older on an industry sector basis as well. So as an example, we see that manufacturing might have a somewhat smaller share of individuals age 55 or older at 27.7%. But in terms of the total number, it's almost 130,000 individuals that are age 55 or older. So if we think about industries that might be related to the Biohealth Tech Hub, we can certainly think about manufacturing. We can think about the large number of individuals that may be retiring in the next 10 years or less. But we can also think about industries like healthcare, where we see a very large number of individuals age 55 or older as well. We can also think about some other industries that may not be have somewhat of a high share of individuals age 55 or older, like professional, scientific, and technical services, which is a large part of the potential Biohealth Tech Hub industry designation. But then again, we can still think that there's almost 30,000 individuals that are of this age group. So it is still a very large number compared to some other industries in the state of Wisconsin. So as we're thinking about different strategies, we can certainly think about the need to attract talent to our communities and also retain individuals who may be in our communities that may be an important part of the workforce for the Biohealth Tech Hub. And just as one example, we can think about the navigational, measuring, electromedical, and control instrument manufacturing category, which is potentially an important component of the Biohealth Tech Hub. And what we're looking at here is the share of these establishments within a 100-mile radius of every county in the United States. So here we're essentially looking at different hotspots of manufacturing within this industry category. And certainly in Wisconsin, especially southeast Wisconsin, you do see a hotspot of employment in this category. And we also see hotspots in the Bay Area of California, and we also see hotspots in the northeast part of the United States. So I think the question to us is, of the individuals that may be working in this industry, especially in southeast Wisconsin, how do we make sure that they remain here and do not perhaps find opportunities in other parts of the country that may also have hotspots in these industries? On the flip side, are there opportunities to perhaps recruit individuals who may be working in other parts of the country in this industry sector and bring them to Wisconsin by showing them all the opportunities that may exist in the Biohealth Tech Hub in the state. So we can use these types of maps to perhaps think about ways to better retain our talent or perhaps target areas to attract individuals from other parts of the country. Another important consideration are changes to immigration policy. And as we will see in many occupational categories related to the Biohealth Tech Hub, there is potentially a notably high share of individuals that perhaps were born in another state and migrated here, or perhaps were born outside the United States and immigrated here. So at the very top, we see computer and mathematical occupations and life, physical, and social science occupations. And here we're looking at the share of individuals in the Madison region that were born in another state or born outside the United States that are in those two occupational categories, excuse me. And we can see that indeed a very high share of occupations located in the Madison region in those two categories, as an example, came from somewhere else. They were not born in the state of Wisconsin or even born in the United States. And if we go on down the line, we can see other shares of important occupations related to the Biohealth Tech Hub, like production, like healthcare, where we do see a notably high share of individuals that came from somewhere else. So as immigration policy changes, we also have to ask ourselves, what does this mean for different occupational categories related to the Biohealth Tech Hub? And do we need to change our types of strategies used to either recruit or grow these occupations in the future? We can also think about labor force participation rates. And one thing to keep in mind for the state of Wisconsin is that we have some of the highest labor force participation rates of any state in the country, usually in the top 10, depending upon the category we're looking at. And indeed here, if we look at the labor force participation rate, and again, thinking about labor force participation rate as the share of individuals that are either employed or unemployed and actively looking for a job, indeed, we can see that the state of Wisconsin exceeds the national average in almost every category, with the exception of individuals aged 65 and older. Now, two categories that are particularly notable in terms of their differentiation from the national averages are individuals aged 16 to 19 and age 20 to 24. So our young workers. Here we do see a very notable difference in terms of the share of individuals that are in the labor force in these two categories. And again, these are important age groups because these are individuals that are coming into the labor force and are perhaps looking for new career opportunities to move forward. So in terms of what this means for the Biohealth Tech Hub, are we engaging these young folks to let them know the types of opportunities that may be available for them moving forward? And potentially this is a source of comparative advantage for the state of Wisconsin. If we look at the participation rates for these young individuals, in example, ages 16 to 19 here, on a county by county basis, we can see that we have very high participation rates relative to many other parts of the country. So this speaks to the fact that many of our young folks do indeed want to work. The question is, are we engaging them in a way to let them know that there are opportunities for them in this industry sector moving forward? A similar example with individuals ages 20 to 24. Again, if we look at it on a county by county basis, we can see that we have many Wisconsin counties that have a very high labor participation rate for these younger individuals. Again, are we engaging them in a way that lets them know that there are opportunities to work in this industry sector moving forward? And if we're not, are there ways that we can better engage them moving forward? We can also think about entrepreneurship as a workforce development strategy. And one thing to keep in mind is that people often think about small businesses as being a source of job growth, but really it's new businesses. And indeed, new businesses are often small businesses, but if we think about businesses of different age groups in terms of how long they've been in business, we can think about net employment change in the state of Wisconsin on a age of firm or age of establishment type of basis. And here we're looking at 4 different time periods. We're looking at the time period from 1990 to 1999, from 2000 to 2009, and then 2010 to 2019, and 2020 to 2023. If you're above zero, you have a positive net employment change of that age of firm. If you're below zero, you have lost employees of that age of firm. So we can see that in these different ages of firm, that firms of less than 1 year of age account for a very large net gain in employees in the state of Wisconsin, whereas older firms often account for a net loss in firms. So if we're not, or net loss of employment, excuse me. If we're not creating new firms, we are missing an opportunity to grow employment in the state of Wisconsin. So we have to think about entrepreneurship as a way of perhaps encouraging individuals to start new businesses. Now, that was for all firms. What if we look at new businesses as a source of job creation for just professional, technical, and scientific services, which again is an important component of the Biohealth Tech Hub? Again, we see a very similar pattern. We can see that new firms account for a large number of net positive jobs created in the state of Wisconsin, whereas older firms often account for very small growth or negative growth in some time periods. So again, if we're not creating new firms, we are missing an opportunity to grow employment and create new opportunities within this industry sector. And indeed, one thing that we've been keeping track of since the onset of the pandemic is a growing interest in individuals that want to start their own businesses. Here we're looking at total business applications in the state of Wisconsin going back to July 2004 up through recent data for August 2025. And we can indeed see that right after the onset of the pandemic, we saw a spike in applications for new businesses. We expected perhaps that to come down somewhat to more historical patterns, but we can see that it has remained elevated even up to the most recent data we have. So again, people are interested in starting their own businesses. We can think about this in two different types of categories. We can think about people starting a business of any type, but we can also think about individuals starting what are known as high propensity applications. So these are businesses that are expected to not just be sole proprietors or the individual running the business themselves. We can also we think about these as firms that are expected to employ new individuals within a very relatively short period of time. And again, here we see a similar pattern as well, growing interest and sustained interest since the pandemic. We can also think about the different skills that individuals may need. Now, we can think about employment from a broad perspective in terms of occupations and just the number of employees in a given industry sector, but we can also think about the specific skills that are needed by the businesses and by occupations that are employed by those businesses. And one tool that is useful for looking at the types of skills needed by different occupations is what's known as the Occupational Information Network, or ONET. And what ONET does is let us think broadly about different occupations in terms of perhaps job zones. So we can think about different job zones that are required by different occupations in terms of job zone 1, which may be little or no preparation. So that may be a type of occupation that may simply require a high school diploma or GED with little or no previous experience needed. We can think about job zone 2, which may require some preparation. So perhaps a high school diploma, some previous work experience, knowledge or experience, and may require a little more additional training for individuals that may span from a few months to a year. We can think about job zone 3, which have a medium preparation, so may require training in vocational schools, related on-the-job experience, or perhaps an associated degree. It may also require additional types of on-the-job training that may require 1 to 2 years, or may also require a recognized apprenticeship program. Job zone 4 are what are known as jobs that require considerable preparation. So they may require a bachelor's degree and may require additional training in terms of work experience or on-the-job training that may go beyond what's required by job zone 3. And job zone 5, which is often required extensive preparation, so maybe graduate school, and also requires extensive skill, knowledge, or experiences, perhaps more than 5 years of experience in some examples. So if we look at different distribution of occupations by job zones, for different industries related to the Biohealth Tech Hub and break them out by different job zones in terms of share of total employment, we can see for the most part there are very few occupations that would be classified as job zone 1. So we also see that many occupations for Tech Hub related industries require a very high share of job zone 2 and job zone 3. I think many times we have the perception that many of these industries require individuals that have a bachelor's degree or higher, but in many instances, like pharmaceutical medicine manufacturing, like nursing and residential care facilities, like hospitals, like ambulatory healthcare services, a very high share of jobs that are located in these industries are within job zone 2 and job zone 3. So perhaps those middle skill type of occupations. So as we're thinking about workforce development related to the Tech Hub, we also have to think about all these other occupations that may not necessarily require a 4-year or advanced degree. So as an example, we can think about the pharmaceutical and medical manufacturing industry and think about the most common occupations that are found in that industry. So if we look at the percent of total employment by different occupations, we can see that packaging and filling machine operators and tenders, chemical equipment operators and tenders, inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers, and first-line supervisors of production and operating workers are the most common occupations found in this industry category, and all of those are job zone 2 or job zone 3. It's not till we get to chemists or industrial engineers where you see a higher share of individuals that perhaps require occupation classified as job zone 4. So as we're thinking about workforce development opportunities, we have to make sure we're thinking about the breadth of occupations that are needed by these different industry sectors and making sure that we are letting individuals know that there are opportunities beyond just some of the traditional 4-year advanced degree types of occupations that we think about for these industries. As I mentioned before, ONET also is an important source of looking at specific skills that may be needed by a given occupation. So if we look at, as an example, the chemical equipment operators and tenders occupation, in ONET, we can look at all the different tasks that are required by these individuals. We can think about many different types of skills that are needed by these individuals. So as we're trying to convey to our economic development professionals or individuals that may be thinking about a new career, we can guide them and help them understand what they may be required of in terms of their education or skill development to work in that industry. And as we think about the Tech Hub going forward, I think a lot of people will have concerns about what automation may be in terms of its impact on the Tech Hub moving forward. So as we think about automation, we can broadly categorize it into 3 different categories. We can think about robotics, we can think about computerization, and increasingly we can think about artificial intelligence. And all these different technologies will indeed influence opportunities for workforce development moving forward related to the Biohealth Tech Hub. There's also, I'm sure, a lot of concerns about what these technologies may be in terms of skill development or perhaps maybe replacing jobs moving forward. A couple of things to keep in mind is that investments in automation often accelerate after an economic downturn. So as we're thinking about the state of the economy moving forward, we can think about automation as perhaps accelerating somewhat if we do see a recession in the next year or two. And perhaps we're already seeing that with artificial intelligence somewhat, with a lot of investment in AI across many different industries across the United States right now. We will also think about automation as influencing opportunities for youth. So many of our youth that can understand these technologies going forward and implement them in their career path going forward will be at an advantage. So are there opportunities for us to better engage our youth in AI, in computerization, in robotics to help position them for opportunities moving forward? And importantly, automation does not necessarily mean job replacement, but will instead influence the types of requirements needed by different occupations going forward. So it may not replace an occupation per se, but it may change the types of skills and routines needed by that occupation. So as we're thinking about workforce development opportunities more moving forward, are we making sure that we are thinking about automation and what it may mean for the types of training programs that we're putting into place to move these occupations from training into the workforce? My contact information is available here. I am more than happy to take emails or phone calls, and I thank you for your time.
Matt, thank you so much again for sharing the data, the insights. Clear that addressing workforce challenges requires a lot of collaboration across the whole Wisconsin ecosystem. As you mentioned, academic, employer, workforce, economic development partners. The data really helps that roadmap for action, not just with the Tech Hub, but Wisconsin as a whole. Tremendous thank you again. Stay tuned for more data and insights with the Wisconsin Biohealth Tech Hub.